Okay, let's talk about cloning. Cloning is the concept in Java which provides a kind of prototype design pattern. That means that when you have some existing object, you can create another object from the existing object. So, second object will be clone of the existing object. There are a lot of situations where you need to create such objects from the existing objects. That concept is called cloning. So cloning is to getting one copy of original object. Okay, so in our earlier programs, when I create a new object, say main object is the class name and obj1 is the type of is the variable name. When I say main object obj1 is equal to main object obj2, okay, and I here I am creating the object obj1, and if I say main object obj2 is equal to obj1. Okay, so here I'm creating another object that is obj2, that is that is nothing but obj1. Okay, and but that is not cloned object. Cloned object is something different. Cloned object, the purpose of cloned object is making two objects independent. Okay, so the first object is the existing object, and the second object which is cloned from the first object, that is that is the copy of that object. So by default when we do the cloning, that is field by field. So we are doing cloning of suppose a class, and class has attributes, some you can say field. Suppose it has 10 fields, so it will do the field by field copy. Okay, suppose I have one employee which has salary, it has id, it has say name. So once I try to do the cloning of that, the cloned object will be copy of each field. Okay, cloned object, when we create a cloned object, that is a new instance. Okay, so it will not refer to the same object, that is the existing object. It will not refer to the existing object, it is a new object. Only difference is that when you create a new instance of a class, the constructor, default constructor of that class will be called. Okay, or otherwise if you want to call parameterized one, that will get called if it is there, if there is any parameterized constructor. In the case of cloning, that's what we understood just now, that cloned object is a new instance, but when you create the cloned object, it does not call the constructor. That's the only difference you can say when you creating say new instance, or when you create the object by cloning. Okay, so suppose you have created one cloned object, say objects clone method. Okay, say x dot clone not equal to x. Suppose you have one object called x of any type of class. So if I say x dot clone, that is a new object. Okay, because that is a cloned object, and cloned object is new object, that is not equal to x. Okay, but their class x dot get class and x dot clone, that is a cloned object, that get class, both are same. Okay, so when I say x dot clone dot get class, that is equal to x dot get class. Okay, and when I say cloning is the copy of field by field, so each field if I try to equate, then whole object will be equal. So that's reason we can say that x dot clone dot equals x. So these values will be always true. Okay, so x dot clone will not be equal to x. X dot clone dot get class will be equal to x dot get class, and x dot clone will be equal to x when I do the equals method. Okay, I will tell you how to do the cloning. Okay, just for making sure that when you are doing cloning, before doing the cloning of any object, because once you are doing the cloning of your object, make sure that you are the destination, the cloned object, the class of the cloned object should be same as the class of original object. So that's the reason we have to put the instance check before doing the cloning. Okay, and cloning, we can do any class, we can do the cloning when it implements a clonable interface. Clonable interface, unless your class is not implementing clonable interface, you cannot do the cloning. If you have seen that in initial videos, I have told you that clone is the method of the object class. So because any class which you are creating, you can simply overwrite it. Okay, then you can ask, if it is, if I can override, what is the purpose of, what is the purpose of clonable interface? Clonable interface is a marker interface. Marker interface is that interface which doesn't have any method. Okay, just have interface and nothing else. So it is a marker interface. Clonable is a marker interface. So if you have any marker interface in Java, okay, so only JVM understands that you, what is the intention of this class. If any class is implementing clonable, it means that JVM understand what is the intent of this class. The intent of this class is this class, the object of this class can be cloned. So to support clonable, you need to implement clonable interface. Then you can override clone method and write the logic of your clone method. Okay, so it is a marker interface. It does not, it does not have clone method. Okay, hence implementing does not mean that you are doing cloning. It is just a intention. Now it's up to you, you fulfill that intention or not. So if I say any class which implements clonable, I can do the cloning? No. If you have to do the cloning, first thing you need to do the implementation of that interface, that is clonable interface. You have to implement clonable interface. Second thing, you have to override clone method of the object. Okay, so need to write clone method in certain manner, else it will give you clone not supported exception at runtime. Certain manner means you have to write the clone method, but before that you have to implement the clonable interface. Okay, how many types of cloning we do in Java? There are two type of cloning. So when I create the copy, it is like very much in general term, when I create a copy of one object to another one, it may be a partial copy, or it could be a full copy. Okay, so you might have seen in your daily example, suppose you are having like twins, right? So twins, two I mean twins, they differ in some certain manner. They are not the exact copy. They look similar, but when you try to drill down their behavior or their whole body structure, they may be different. From some angle they might be different. Similar way, when you do the cloning of any object, the cloned object may have the all the properties copied, or may it have copied the partial one. When I say partial one, it means that the cloned object is depending on the change, is depending on the change of original object. If original object is changed, the cloned object is changed. If cloned object is changed, the original object is changed. So considering those kind of behavior, there are two type of cloning. One is shallow cloning, one is deep cloning. Shallow cloning is something where your properties are copied, but whenever you make change in existing object, your cloned object will be impacted, or vice versa. When you make the change in cloned object, your existing object can be impacted. So that way it is called solo cloning. Deep cloning is completely making cloned object independent of original object. So once you create the clone object from original object, after that if you make any change in deep in the original object or in cloned object, there will be no impact on each other. Okay, so shallow cloning, generally when we clone the so when we write the clone method, that is kind of a shallow cloning. Okay, by default it provides, by default cloning concept provides the shallow cloning. If you want to have the deep cloning, you have to put some extra effort. When you say extra effort, you may need to copy field by field. Okay, and other way, you have to, suppose you are copying few reference object while cloning, then you have to mark the referenced object also as a clonable. Okay, another way is doing copy constructor. Okay, I will tell you. And last way is also doing this by serialization. Serialization is like passing object over the network. Okay, so serialization, by doing the serialization you can get the deep copy, deep cloning. Okay, so serialization I will tell you later. Okay, issue with shallow cloning, that's what I explained. If you are changing some behavior in uh, existing object, your cloned object will be changed. If you are changing something cloned object, your existing object will change. So that's the issue with shallow cloning. That's reason we will try to, whenever we go for cloning, we need to put something extra to make it deep cloning. Okay, so deep cloning, no need to separately copy primitive. So whenever we make the cloning, we generally whatever primitive types, those are will be automatically copied to the new object. All the member class in the original class should support cloning, and in clone method, the original class in the context should call super.clone on all member classes. Okay, so here the point is, when you try to do the deep cloning and you have some member class in a class. Okay, suppose employee has a class, it has department as a member class. So when I'm trying to do the cloning of employee class, what happens here, the reference of department will be copied to cloned object. The new object of the department will not be created when you create the clone object. That's the problem with solo cloning. When you try to do the deep cloning, what you need to do is you need to make department class as clonable class, and in department class you need to write the clone method, so that whenever you do the cloning of the employee object, department class, a new reference or department class will be copied to the cloned object. Okay, if any member class does not support cloning, then in clone method one must create a new instance of that member class. Okay, so to do the deep cloning, you either you implement either you do the member class as a clonable and implement the override the clone method inside the member class, or you create a new instance of that member class and manually copy the field, okay, to the new member class, then associate that member class reference, new member class reference, to the parent. Okay, then do the cloning of the parent class. That way you can do the deep cloning. Deep cloning can be achieved by serialization too, but it's expensive. So Normally try to do the, when you are looking for deep cloning, try to do the deep cloning by other mean that I explained. Okay, so whenever you do the cloning, as I said earlier, you do the instance check. Make sure that the type of original class is original, the type of original object is same as the type of cloned object. Cloning doesn't call constructor. Okay, so need to set arguments using setters or other values mean. Okay, suppose you are creating the clone object will not call the constructor. Sometimes you create the constructor because you want to set some values using constructor, but in case of cloning, because constructor is not being called, you have to set the values by using its setter method. Okay, or some other mean which you want to do. If you write some method to set the value, that's up to you, you can write it. Okay, next is when you're trying to do the cloning, don't do this clonable. You should not say obj2 is equal to clonable obj1 dot clone, because clonable doesn't have any method, it's just a marker class. Okay, so let's try to see the working of how cloning works in Eclipse.